Welcome to Triple Sigma. This is your host, Alex Feinberg, and joining us today is another immensely successful, tremendous mindset guest, former Major League catcher Jonathan Lucroy. Jonathan, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Good. Thanks, Alex. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no problem. So, a lot of folks who follow us on X, on Twitter, may have been familiar with the somewhat viral post that I made and he reposted a few weeks back about how a majority of Major League Baseball players are, at the very least, not left leaning. Now, the thing that got me in trouble, particularly in the eyes of left leaning journalists and fans, was because I said fairly directly that it's very difficult to be a successful athlete with the mindset of a victim. Because, over the last 5 or 10 years, I think it's fairly obvious, at least within our viewing audience, that mantra has become synonymous with left-wing ideology, though, many boomer type liberals may disagree with me and feel free to. I definitely think that I've seen that over the last 5 or 10 years. And I've spoken to many other professional athletes who've noticed that themselves and noticed that the mindset that was required for us to get drafted and for us to succeed within sports or outside of sports was almost the opposite of what is being preached by many in positions of authority today. So, I had to say it. Jonathan reposted it, noting, his estimates of 90% of Major League Baseball players leaning right. This probably is not going to be a tremendously political podcast, but, we're bringing great minds together to talk about the mindset that's necessary to succeed at the highest level. So with that said, Jonathan, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you having me. I love talking about these things, and to me, it's not a really political thing. It's more of a cultural thing. And I'm looking forward to having it and talking about it and just stating facts of what I've seen work, um, in my career, what I've not seen work. And just observations, just factual observations and first person experiences. And I'm looking forward to talking more.
So let's talk about how you grew up. Did you have a blue collar job for some money during the summers when you were younger? Did you do manual labor when you were younger? And the types of mindsets that you saw get rewarded and get punished in your early years, as well as through your amateur career and in the minor league. So obviously, the mindset that you have today was not the mindset that you had at 10 years old or 5 years old. Experiences are what shaped you. And so for our listening audience who isn't familiar with how you became as successful as you were as a major leaguer and now a baseball coach, how did we get here today?
Well, grew up in a blue collar family, had a really good father and really good grandfather, two good, really good grandfathers. And so I had some very, very, very good, high quality men in my life that guided me and stewarded me properly. So I know not everybody can say that. And I know how fortunate and blessed that I am to have that as my childhood. And I, my dad, I would see my dad get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, go to work, and he fertilized golf courses. That's what he did. And he got out there before the golfers, before the first tee times, got all the work done. He drove in a truck with special tires on it and spread the golf courses, the fairways, and then got off and got done before the golfers showed up. And then would come home, take a couple hour nap, eat some lunch, and then come pick me up from school and take me to baseball practice every single day. And he was a grinder. He still is. And so, my grandfather the same way. My grandfather, his dad, has a fifth grade education, and I grew up in middle of nowhere, Mississippi, as a child of a sharecropper. Which, if you know anything about sharecropping, it's where poor families basically travel around in caravans and groups. And there's 5, 10 families that travel around together. And my grandmother, his wife, was in one of the other families, and that's where they met, picking cotton in Mississippi. And they would travel around, grew up on dirt floors. And so my dad saw that. And so growing up, I did everything from lawn. I mowed yards, push mower. I did concrete work. One of my dad's good buddies was a concrete contractor, and I did concrete work in Florida in the summer which was absolutely brutal. And on top of that, I did my school stuff, played travel baseball. And so I had a really, really good masculine example to look up to for sacrifice, hard work, selflessness. And but I'd be lying if I told you that I've always that I followed that example to a T, because I haven't. I've made some mistakes, and so it's I got no excuses in the modeling department. I had great role models in my father and my grandfather.
Well, tell me this, your first amazing meal that you had after you signed your first big deal, how did the taste of that compare to the average lunch that you would eat after sweating your balls off in
Yeah,
Florida doing concrete
I
work?
mean the nicest place we went to, in high school and in college was really like Outback Steakhouse, and you go to Outback and you're like, man, this is awesome. And then
It's
all
the
of a sudden,
best, right? Outback Steak.
I still like
And
Outback.
I literally remember the best tasting ribs I have ever eaten was when I visited my aunt and uncle in Michigan, and they had an Outback near their house, and I didn't have one nearby. And it was the first time I had baby back ribs. Probably cost like $12.99 or so, maybe $15 because that was expensive at the time. And those were the best tasting ribs that I've ever had. And every multi-$100 meal that I've had after that maybe is as good.
Right. I mean, and now, once I got to the big leagues and you start living that big league lifestyle, it's like, man, you're going to Capitol Grill and everybody everywhere else like that. So, you get spoiled, and yeah, you enjoy the fruits of your labor and all those things. And, the secret is not drinking the Kool-Aid too much and believing what people say about you, and the problem is like for me, the one thing I saw in baseball is and really in life is just a lack of humility. And it's humility is extremely important. And my first couple years in the big leagues, I was just like thankful to be there. And then I signed my first deal, and then all of a sudden, I had some money and all these things. And then I started playing really well, and I became an all-star a couple times. And the problem is that you know whenever you are on a field and you're playing well and you're being glorified by thousands of people every day, standing ovations and things like that. I can't speak for everybody, but this is me. I started to believe that. And instead of just being humble and thankful, which I was thankful, but there's that balance of the confidence and believing in yourself to also not letting it get to your head, not letting it, you know, not allowing it to affect you negatively, where you take things for granted and you're like, "Oh, I am good. I am really good. I'm one of the best players. Look at all these people cheering for me and all these things." And you have to. That's one thing I wish I would have stayed a little more grounded whenever that happened. Now I was young, I was naive, but I'm thankful too that some of the negative experiences that led to, a few years later, it really shaped who I am today and how I see the world and the uh, kind of my paradigm of where I'm at now, my mindset and my worldview, right? And so, what I'm a big believer in always being humble. Now, not being. We need to be confident and believe in what we do and believe in our ability, but we can't let that get to our head and think that we know everything, because we don't. There's always someone that knows more, and there's always a better player. There's always a better podcaster. There's always a better lawyer, doctor. There's always someone out there that's better than you. And um, my dad used to call it. He used to tell me whenever I was younger. He used to say, "Jonathan, you have to have necessary arrogance. And whenever you go out and play and you work and you practice, you need to separate yourself from the other players, but do it in a good way. Do it in a positive way. Be different than everybody else, but in a good way. Do the extra work. Pick up trash when no one's looking. Do the extra work, and all that will be honored." And he was right. He was right. One of the best lessons my dad ever taught me about leadership and accountability. I'll never forget it. And I've talked about this before. I think I posted some stuff on Twitter about it. But we were 12 years old, and 12 years old was whenever I first started to be one of the better players on the team. I started to separate myself physically from the other players. And my dad was a coach, head coach, and we were out practicing. And my dad would do station practices. So we'd have 8 or 9 hitting stations around, tee work and flips and whatever, speed sticks and little golf balls. And that's how we did it. He didn't do the little league dad, everyone standing around digging holes while one kid hits type thing. He wanted everybody moving. And so we had all these stations set up, and two of my teammates were screwing around, and they were over there messing around playing. And my dad calls the whole team together, stops practice, whole team together, and brings us all together. And he looks at me. And believe me, I was always working. I never didn't get after it whenever I practiced. He said, Jonathan, you start running right now, right in front of the whole team. And I was like, what? And he's like, start running. And so I ran laps the whole practice, the rest of practice. And I didn't know why. I was 12. I didn't know why. And, after the practice, we were driving home and he's like, do you know why I made you run laps? And I said, no, sir, I do not. He said, it's not what you did, it's what you did not do. He said, that's why you ran. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you had two teammates over there that were screwing around and you didn't handle it. You didn't go over there and be the leader that you're supposed to be. And I said, yes, sir, I understand. It'll never happen again. And it never happened again. And that whole thing, that experience led in, you know, I started calling everybody out after that. I mean, there was never a team I was on that I didn't call somebody out, college all the way up to even the big leagues. Like it was a lesson in leadership that I'll never forget. You hold people accountable, but two, you hold yourself accountable, and you have to hold yourself accountable first before you hold somebody else accountable. If you can't do that, you're just pointing fingers and not pointing thumbs. We always point the thumb first. What can I do to be better? And then, okay, I can be better this way. Now I'm going to go get this guy. He has to be better too. If you elevate yourself, people will elevate behind you when you're a leader. And so that's right. And so it's accountability. You talked about it. You can't be a victim. You're going to get beat up in life. Things are going to happen. You're going to make a mistake. You're going to screw up. We all know that. We're human. But it's what you do about it. It's how you react and not repeating that mistake. You might make the mistake once, but you shouldn't make it twice. And that is where culturally, I think we struggle.
Now, how did he have this leadership training? Because I think if on first look, you say his dad had a fifth grade education, he works blue collar, so clearly, like he didn't get an MBA, he wasn't in the military, he didn't have any formal training, but almost certainly there was good mentorship that was going on within your family, likely for multiple generations, in spite of, working lower middle class or middle class blue collar jobs. There was some sort of leadership intelligence that was living under the surface that hadn't been expressed in a way that would make newspaper headlines. Is that right?
Yeah. So my grandfather, he's still alive. They're still going. He's still working. He's 89 years old. He's an animal. And my grandfather was a great example for my dad. And my grandfather and grandmother, they fifth grade education, grandmother, eighth grade education, grew up on dirt floors, picking cotton, traveling around the South. They moved to Florida to pick oranges. And that's where I grew up at. And they they were really hardworking. And, I'm sure that actually that's a great question. I need to ask my dad where he got that lesson from. I do know my dad was a professional softball player and he had a chance to go play high level college baseball, but this is back in the 80s or early, like 81. I think he graduated high school. And, he met my mom, got married, and then started working. He didn't want to go play. He didn't play baseball. And I don't want to say he regretted marrying my mom. He doesn't, but he always told me, he said, focus on your career, focus on baseball, the right woman will come, that kind of thing, which really worked out for me really well. He used to drill that into me and my brothers. I have two younger brothers. And so my dad's role model was definitely my grandfather, and they're very close. They talk every day still. That's where I'm sure that's where he got that from. However, I think I will ask him specifically where he got that idea at, because it was a life changer for me, game changer. And
Yeah.
I use that today. I use that with my son. I mean, he's 7, but I use that with him and with my high school kids that I coach. And so, we had an issue about a month ago, and we had 2 team captains on our team. We had an issue internally on our team, and, the two team captains, there's an incident with another player who wasn't acting conducive to the team. And, I jumped those two captains. I hit them hard. I'm like, you are responsible, not the kid. He screwed up, but you are responsible. You should have handled this situation. We shouldn't have to handle it. And they both understood what we were talking about, myself and the head coach. And so it's extremely important that we are accountable to ourselves first. Did I do my job? And then once we are accountable to ourselves in a truthful, honest way, then we could take it to other people and have a discussion on how to be better. Last week, we had some bad weather here. So we had a speaker come in when we couldn't practice. And that speaker is a really, really good friend of mine who is a 20-year SEAL, Navy SEAL, lives locally here in Dallas. And one of the things that he said, he spoke for about an hour. One of the things that he said really, 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 I've heard it before, but it was really interesting to think about it. He said it in a different way. Two things. He said, you have to what he said, first thing you need to think about is at what level are you willing to participate? You have to ask yourself that question. At what level am I willing to participate? Right. And the second thing he said, one of the best self-examination, practices you can do is, if I'm on a team, how good will my team be if they all work like I work, or if they all acted the way I act? If
Yeah.
everyone did, how
Yeah.
good will my team be if they carried themselves the way I carry myself? Right. And so it was really interesting hearing it from him, who's, I mean, the guy's an American hero, right? He's done some things that are just unbelievable. And not only that, did it for, made into SEAL teams, but did it for 20 years and experienced as much death and destruction as he did, you know, uh, and he's still sane, which I don't know if I would be sane, but he is. And still has all together and still married, and his kids and everything are all. And so it's really, really, really interesting to think about the mindset of of high performers. And then the thing I keep coming back to is this humility and honest self-examination, and being able to be honest with yourself. And when you're honest with yourself, you can be honest with other people, because it brings validation to the argument, brings validation to your comments. It means something. It's not just pointing fingers everywhere. Your fault, your fault, your fault, your fault, your fault. Versus like, okay, I'm the leader. And if I'm going to be the guy that's going at getting on people, then I need to confront myself first. How can I be better? Because you can't make people better if you can't make yourself better. That's just
Right.
a fact.
Right. I've often said that when you're in a leadership position, the organization will effectively add leverage to whatever personality characteristics you have, because whether you realize it or not, when you're in a leadership position, everybody will model their behavior after you, and your mindset and your attitude will infect everybody by osmosis, whether you intend to or not. And so this is so interesting when you talk about the leadership characteristics that your Navy SEAL friend has, and the leadership characteristics that you learned through your father, who learned them through his father, because to me, that's wealth. And I spend, and I'm sure you spend time around a lot of people who've been extremely financially successful. And I think one of the unfortunate things when you have made a lot of money is the strategic planning that people take with their financial advisor is almost always around finances, and how much money am I going to pass to my kids, and how much money are they going to pass to their kids. But if you think about the stories that Jonathan shared, do you think that, first of all, Jonathan has not received any inheritance from his grandfather because he's alive, and he wouldn't have had any money to pass on to him in all likelihood had he passed away early. And, you think about the value of creating a platform for your family to not just survive, but to thrive. Do you think Jonathan would be better off if he had a trust fund, or do you think Jonathan would be better off having the leadership training that was passed down to him by his father through his father? And I think almost everybody would pick the latter. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people, when they've made a substantial amount of money, they can fool themselves into thinking, well, if I have enough money to last multiple generations, that's sufficient. And the reality is you can't put a price on the leadership training that Jonathan has, because that leadership training allowed him to succeed on his own in a highly competitive world at the world class level. And so if you were to assign a dollar value to it, which you can't, it would be in the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, it's not different from his grandfather being a billionaire, passing on that level of wealth a couple generations because of the value of the lessons that it imparted upon his offspring and their offspring.
Yeah, Alex. I mean, that's it's like, look, I'm a Christian, and there's a lot of biblical concepts in life that can be applied, to this lesson. And I think, in Matthew, Jesus was talking about how, if you teach a man to fish, he can catch fish for a lifetime instead of catching fish for him and giving it to him. And I think learning about there's two different forms of leadership that I subscribe to, right? You got steward leadership, where you're stewarding the resources under you, stewarding them responsibly. And you have servant leadership, where, servant leadership is the model of, you're not below people, you're not putting yourself last, you're under them, supporting them, and they're above you, and you're holding them up. And those are you're just protecting them, you're holding them, you're keeping, your strength, they're on your shoulders. But you're doing it willingly, you're not doing it forcefully. And so it's something that those two concepts are two things that I've studied extensively. And I think that serving other people and helping steward resources properly is very, very, very important. And all these things require that you have to be honest with yourself. You got to be humble. You got to be someone who is teachable and can take ownership of situations, even whenever it's not directly your fault. If you're the leader, it is your fault, and you did screw up. I mean, there's a great book by Jocko Willink, another Navy SEAL, and Jocko's real big podcaster, and he does a lot of stuff. It's called Extreme Ownership, and he talks about everything that happens under your command and his in his eyes, or in our families, or in our workplaces, if you're an upper management guy, or anything that's under your purview, is your responsibility. So even if, as a coach, right, and my catcher screws up behind the plate, it's my responsibility. And what happens is, it's actually interesting. I'm gonna segue over to a story, whenever I was with Oakland, with the A's, and my career, I got hurt. I hurt my neck real bad, and I had some issues. In 2018, my career like took a nosedive, and in 18, I signed a contract with the A's, and so I showed up, and at this time, I had about 8 years of service, something like that, 8.5 years of service, and my goal was like, I want to get to 10 years of service. So I'm at 8.5 years of service, and I'm going, okay, I got to be honest with myself. Looking at my numbers, I suck. Okay. I freaking suck. Like, if I do not pick it up, I'm not going to have a job. So if I know I'm hurt, my body's not I'm beat up. My swing isn't my hand-eye coordination is jacked up because I hurt my neck real bad, had a real bad neck impingement, all these things, or a herniation. How can I provide value that will be impactful to the game? Now, I know I'm not going to play as well as I want to physically, or what I'm used to physically. So how can I provide value in a way that'll let me hang on a few more years, right? And so what I did is I actually read that Extreme Ownership book, and I made a vow to myself at the beginning of the season in 2018 that I was going to take responsibility for every bad pitch, everything that happened with the pitcher in a negative way, and every good thing that happened behind the plate or with the pitcher, I would give credit to the pitcher. Every bad thing that happened, I would say it's my fault. I should have done this or shouldn't have done that. And what I started doing is, I don't want to say this is manipulation, but it kind of is. It's a psychological trick that I actually employed a little bit. So I thought about this a lot, and I'm going, okay, I think about whenever I have an issue with somebody and I go to them and they go, hey, I made a mistake. I should have been better. You know, it was my fault, right? Not me, but like the other person said that to me. And I imagine how I felt about that. And I would always, if someone did that to me, like right now, if you insulted me and then you say, hey, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that, I would immediately go, no, man, I said something that I shouldn't have said to you. Like that's my fault for, I don't want to use the word triggering. I hate that word, but I pissed you off, right? I insulted you. I did that. So you reacted that way. That was really negative. And so what I did is I thought about that and I'm like, okay, when someone comes to me in humility, I immediately go, okay, we can figure it out. Let's talk about it. How do I got to be better? Right. Like I want to reciprocate that humility when someone comes to me in humility. And so I started doing that during the game. And if a guy hung a pitch and got hit out, I would go back to the dugout. And previously in my career, guy hung a pitch, and got hit out. The pitching coach every single time comes up to me and says, "Hey, where is that slider at? Or where's that fastball?" And I'll go, "Oh yeah, he yanked it back over the middle." I'd point at the pitcher. If he yanked it back, I'd point a finger. I He yanked it, he hung it, he made a bad pitch, he shook me off. And that never worked out good. It never did. The pitcher's over there pissed off and he's like, "I just gave it up." And he's looking at me and I'm pointing at him and the pitching coach was looking at him. It's like I'm putting I'm shucking blame. I'm shucking the blame. Versus whenever I was in Oakland, I was like, I'm not doing that anymore. It just, I got to create value. And if I'm the douchebag catcher that blaming everybody every time they make a bad pitch, no one's going to want to, that's not going to work, even though it's truth, right? I'm not throwing the ball. He is, but I'm going to make it, I'm going to make it weird. Like I'm going to get super weird with this. I started hung a curveball, same situation, pitching coach. What happened? I set up too middle, or my glove was too high, or it was the wrong pitch. You know what? I should have called a fastball, or I should have set up more outside on the corner. I should have set up on white line away, whatever. It's my fault. I shouldn't have called that pitch. I would take blame for that. And I really meant it because I wanted the pitcher to see that his catcher was bought in, that I cared about him, that I loved the dude, and I wanted him to be successful. So I would take blame. And every single time I did, I swear this is true. Every single time I did that, and the pitching coach goes, "Hey, Lucroy said he should have called a slider right there." Or he said that he should have set up, given you a better target away or something, whatever. And the pitcher would be like, "No, man, I made a bad pitch. I hung it, or I shook him off, or whatever." He would take blame for it. And so what he saw he saw me being the catcher, one of the leaders on the team, holding myself accountable for something that I didn't, all I did was put the finger down and set up. But I would still blame myself. I would still accept responsibility for it as a leader. And I'm telling you, dude, it completely changed the dynamic in the clubhouse with the pitchers and me. I mean, they trusted me, and we had the second best bullpen in the league. We won 98 games that year with 18 different starting pitchers. 18
Wow.
different starting pitchers. Okay. For context for the viewers, you start the year with 5 starting pitchers. We had 18, and most of them were AAA guys that went up and down. I mean, it's Oakland A's. I mean, you guys know we had the smallest budget in baseball. And so when 98 games played in the wild card game against the Yankees, they crushed us. And we got up, but still, I call that a win. I mean, in that situation, you're talking about $200 million budget versus a $60 million budget. And I call that a win. And so it was a great year for our team. And by the way, I hit 250 that year, and I was statistically the worst catcher in the league. And we won 98 games, right? 98 games. Why? Because the pitchers trusted me. Because I was prepared, to play the game. I knew the scouting reports in and out. Did I perform physically behind the plate and at the plate? No, I sucked. Okay. But I provided value, calling a game, and leadership and in the clubhouse. And it led to team-wide success. So having gone through that experience, and it was a working theory at the time, but now looking back on that, I'm like, dude, that's the only way to do it, man. It's the only way to do it. You walk in, you take accountability and blame as a leader for everything. And then whenever the people under you aren't going to be like, if they made a mistake and they see their boss or their leader or their captain or whoever take responsibility for their mistake, they're going to be like, "No, it's not your fault. It's I should have done this better," or whatever. They will all of a sudden shift that victim mindset, the blame mindset, to themselves, because they see you blaming or taking blame yourself, taking responsibility yourself. And so, I do that within my family. I'm not perfect. Okay. I've made a lot of mistakes, but what I have found is that whenever we have that kind of mindset where you are making yourself be responsible for the people under your purview's failures or mistakes, those people want to elevate up because they see that humility, and humility is attractive.
Mm,
Humility is attractive. It is. That is, it's ingrained in our DNA. We are attracted to people who are humble and successful at the same time. The humility is extreme because it's just inherently in us. We were born with it. And with that attraction towards, that humble mindset. Like, think about it. Like, our cocky, arrogant people are not attractive.
mhm.
People that think they're better than they are or smarter than they are. And that's just not attractive. Humility is very attractive. And it's something that if you use it wisely, if you steward it wisely, you can have a massive, massive impact on the people around you. I mean, it's something that is very important.
That's a tremendous story. The obvious question, the obvious follow-up question to me is this works in a small team or a family where everybody is held accountable and there's a high level of visibility on what everybody is doing. And ultimately everybody's performance is closely measured. And even if the pitcher appreciates you for taking accountability for him hanging a slider, if he hangs too many of them, he's going to find himself in AAA in a few weeks anyway. What happens at the societal level when leaders take accountability for the failures of not just the people who are in the trenches with them, but like millions and millions of people? And
Yeah.
they say, no, it's not your fault. It's our fault. We
You know,
created these policies that disadvantaged you. We were responsible for pushing forward cultural initiatives that were meant to marginalize you, and they did.
yeah,
What happens
yeah.
when the leaders aren't leading 25 people, but they're leading 250 million people and they try to take that same approach?
I had I have a good friend of mine who's a very, very, very wealthy guy, multi-billionaire, like multi-billionaire guy that I've met. And he's a big political conservative guy. There's a lot of donors and he has a whole thing. And he does. I actually asked him about that. And I said, I want to call him Frank. That's not his name, but I'm going to call him Frank. So I asked Frank, I said, I have a thought about this. And I said, what if you're running for office and the day that you do your inaugural speech of, hey, I'm running for office, I'm announcing my candidacy for whatever office, let's say the president, because that's the most interesting. And you say, okay, you pull out a piece of paper and you have every single thing on this piece of paper, every mistake that you've made. That's public, or maybe some private ones, but every screw up you've done, and you go through it. I did this, I did that, I did this, and this. Right? These are the mistakes that I've made in my life that I extremely regret that I should have been better at. Then you put it down and you say, okay, this is what I'm going to do about it. This is why I'm running for office. And you go through a spiel. I said, would that be attractive to the populace? And he looked at me, he goes, that's actually an interesting idea. I'd never thought about that before. And so I thought about that. Like, if I, if I, if there's someone running for president and they get up on stage and they sit there and say, look, I've made a lot of mistakes, man, I've done this, and this, and I regret it. And I'm sorry for the people I hurt or whatever. I would vote for that guy in a heartbeat. You know, I would, just because it's like, again, it's humility. It's attractive. And I get it, that, and maybe people probably see it different than me. Maybe I don't understand a lot about how people can be told by a party, you know, it's like the old Charles Barkley thing, he was on an interview or something and he was talking about, it was with a bunch of other guys and they were talking about how black people are poor and, that they're in poverty and all these things. And he's like, and it's relating it to politics. And he goes, black people have been poor for 60 years. He's like, he goes, we've been voting Democrat for 60 years and we're still poor. It's like, how do you keep repeating that behavior? So, how do we keep doing that? It's like me turning on my stove and I keep going like this on the burner. Hey, I'm not going to get burned again. I'm not going to get burned this time. I don't understand why we aren't. And I'm not saying like I'm a conservative guy, and I don't. Yeah, I'm a registered Republican, but I'm not. I don't agree with everything. Even the conservative side does. Like I think there's people out there that are power hungry. I think you got. I think it's simple. I think you got good people, and I think you got bad people. And I think it's. I don't think it's left or right. I think it's good and bad. You know, I think there are good people on the left that mean well, but the problem is that well-meaning intent can turn into suicidal empathy,
Mhm.
right? And it just doesn't. At some point, we have to let people suffer the consequences of their actions, and because if we don't, they're not going to learn their lesson. Like,
Mhm.
go out and work, figure it out. Like, quit making excuses. My grandfather, fifth grade education, grew up on a dirt floor. He's now a multimillionaire. Why? Because he he kept his money in the bank and just stacked it on interest. He bought and sold 3 different motels, not hotels, motels in his life, and now he has a couple million bucks in the bank after being a 5th grade. I mean, that's unbelievable to me.
Right.
And, I mean, what a American success story, right? And by the way, like they used to travel around with the blacks. Like it, all the black people and the white people, and then they had some Mexicans that were in there. They were all poor, and they would all travel. My grandmother has told me the stories. Like they would travel around these caravans and pick cotton and pick soybeans and whatever crop was in season. They would travel there, live on the property, and farm. They were basically, you know, they were indentured servants, I guess. I don't know, but it was wild. And the racial division to me is something that really bothers me a lot because in baseball, dude, like we play from people all over the world. Dominicans and Asians and South Americans, like everywhere. And we didn't care what you look like. I don't care if you're from Venus and you're purple. Like I don't care at all. I just want you to do your job and help us win the game, right? I want you to be a good teammate. That's it. Just do your job. And be work hard, be a good teammate, execute, execute whenever you're playing, execute the play, and that's it. That's all I want. And because what's expected of me. So why are we expected to execute and to do our job, but these other people are not? And it's our fault that they're not. I don't. It's confusing.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
but
yeah,
unfortunately, this is where we're at.
I think one of the reasons why you don't see extreme accountability in politics is unlike when you're dealing with your family or when you're dealing in a locker room. When you're dealing with your family or you're dealing in a locker room, it's a small enough group where one person speaks at a time if you're having a group meeting and everybody's attention is on the person speaking. What happens when you are talking about politics at the national level or even the state or local level, most people aren't dropping everything that they're doing to watch the guy talk every time he's talking. So most of the exposure that people get to what a politician says is through the news cycle. So they're actually getting the word of the politician secondhand through their news source. And what happens when you take accountability for something bad is that becomes a news story. And so because that becomes a news story, and people aren't focused on politics the way they are hopefully focused on how things in their family are going or how things in their team are going. If 60% of the time they turn on the news and something bad is being talked about, Jonathan made a mistake and he's talking about it, the natural conclusion is that Jonathan makes a lot of mistakes. So he must
Yeah,
have done something wrong. Where if you're actually in the trenches with you, it's actually no, Jonathan takes accountability for things that he shouldn't even take accountability for. But
yeah,
because you don't own 100% of the attention of your voters, and it's not a small group where you're the only person talking and they're getting the information through a third party, I always look at people who compete at the highest level. And if they do something that seems weird to me, but it's very consistent across all of them, I assume that there's a benefit to it that I haven't figured out yet. And so I played, I didn't play at the level that Jonathan did, but I still played professionally for a couple years and I played in college for a very good coach. And just like any other very good coach, he held us accountable to the extreme. And when I graduated from high school, that was when the global financial, or when I graduated from college, that was when the global financial crisis hit. And you're seeing all these bank CEOs speak in front of Congress and you're continue to see politicians speak. And one thing that was apparent to me is everything that I was expected to do as an athlete in terms of taking accountability was not done at all
Nope.
by our business leaders and our political leaders. But these are the most successful, quote unquote, the most successful, highest visibility ones in the world. And so if none of them are taking accountability and they're being coached by the most expensive PR agencies in the country that are telling them in all likelihood not to take accountability, there has to be a reason for it. And my guess is the reason has to do with how the news cycle works.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's really easy to do a video and 90% of the interview would be you taking accountability and the 10% is your mistake and they just cut out the 90% and just use the 10% and just feed it over and over and over again. I mean, it's just brainwashing. It's essentially, from a media standpoint, what sells in media? What sells on TV? You know, drama,
Right.
controversy.
Right.
People don't want to, you know, people don't want to see happy go lucky, everything's good all the time. They want to see other people have problems and they want to see other people suffer suffer things and go through struggles because that's drama. And media knows that and they really feed it. I mean, I saw it on a lot smaller scale in baseball. If I did an interview with a reporter after a game we lost, he would cut out all the positive stuff I said. And if I said one negative thing, he would freaking blow that up. And I've
Mhm.
seen it multiple times. Why? Because he wants people to read his stuff and get all fired up. And then they would follow him on social media somewhere and get more content. And so, for me, I don't relish in other people's suffering. I never want to see that. And, I think there are a lot of people that feel that same way. The good news is that, within the last 5 years, especially since COVID, the trust in the mainstream media has completely cratered. I mean, it's a complete dumpster fire with how little they are trust. Um, and I think that's why we've had such a huge rise in podcasting, a huge rise in live streaming because people don't trust the media. And, you know, uh, it's if you ever go on and watch like MSNBC or something and hear what they talk about on there, I mean, if I listened to that all day, every day, I would freaking hate everybody. I would hate myself if I wouldn't listen to that. With how negative and how just vicious that stuff is. Like, all the things they say about the conservative side. I mean, dude. Now the conservative side does the same thing. And I don't think it's to that extent, but they do. It's just it's ridiculous. Freedom of speech is extremely important. But I mean, at least we can still do that. I mean, if you go to Britain right now and say something, you're going to go to prison for life. You see
Yeah,
that
you'd
guy?
be a felon if you.
Dude. Yeah, I'd be in prison for sure if I lived in Britain. But it's unbelievable how the world has changed in 10 years. I mean, it's kind of scary. My son's 7, my daughter's 15. I'm like, man, I look at my son sometimes. I'm like, what's he going to experience in his life? How can I prepare him for that of which we know it's coming. It's not gonna go back to the way it used to. It just won't. It's too late. Like 50% of the country, you know, they they're very negative. It's just like, dude, in they don't believe in our country and what it was founded upon. It's the basic principles of what we were founded upon. They just don't believe in it. And
Right.
it's really sad because we've always been a shining light on the hill. And that's why everyone wanted to come here. There's a reason why people wanted to come here.
Unfortunately, this is a byproduct of free speech and capitalism because if you want to make the most money and you want to make the most out of the 30 seconds you have on air, you need to deliver the most emotionally charged message that you possibly can. And the most emotionally charged message that you can possibly deliver, typically, if you only have 30 seconds to make it, is convincing people that they're victims and that they're being taken advantage of by the oppressor class or by the other team. And so you create this tribal dynamic. And as you said,
Yeah.
both parties do it. And the reason why both parties
Tribalism.
do it, the reason why both parties engage in tribalism is because it works, at least in the short term. But the long term implications are you spent a lot of time fighting against each other rather than working with each other towards a common goal.
Do you know what the most uniting, well, there's been multiple of them, but two of the most uniting points in American history that united the country were Pearl Harbor and 9/11. And, those are two of the most, everyone was on the same page in those two instances. And it's really sad that that's what it took, you know, really sad. And I tell you, it's like, man, soon, that was only 20, almost 26 years ago or 25 years ago for 9/11. I remember when it happened. And everyone was like, everyone, everyone was like, let's go. Who did it? We're going to go destroy him. Let's go. I'm like, dude, that was only 20 something years ago. What are we doing? Like, what, how do we, and you know what it is? It's media, dude. Like they come in, they separate them, they divide them out in the subgroups, tribal groups, and then just freaking victimize themselves and vilify the other group. And we all do it. I mean, they all do it. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, I don't blame Democrats for anything. I blame us. I blame the conservatives. Right. And I think that's what we should do. I think we need to blame ourselves. And, it's like, I think that we have to lead, like conservatives, we have to lead and we have to be who we're supposed to be. We have to be men. We have to be strong. We have to be leaders. We have to hold ourselves accountable. And it's just the bottom line. I mean, you can't change people, they have to change themselves. And so that's just one thing I've learned is you can't help someone that doesn't want to help themselves. And you can't change anybody unless they want to change themselves. And so they have to be willing to do that. And, and that means they have to be unhappy with their station in life, but to a point where they're honest with themselves. But when they're being fed a narrative that's the other side's fault, that we're oppressing them. I mean, I had a guy tell me one time, this is another true story. A couple years ago, I went on vacation. One of the people, we were at a birthday party on a vacation. One of the people there was a absolutely like raging liberal, him and his wife. And they were both half black, half white. But they're both doctors. Okay. And they multi-millionaire, very wealthy. And we were in the pool, had a couple pina coladas, I was like, my wife was like, don't do it. I'm like, I'm going to do it. So I waited, I got in there and I just started debating him. And at one point he told me he was oppressed. And I'm like, I looked at him, I'm like, you're a multimillionaire, you're a doctor, medical doctor. Your wife's a doctor and you're oppressed. And it just blew my mind because he wasn't even living in reality. I'm like, you're
Right.
going to be oppressed. If you don't know what oppression is, like, go to frickin', I don't know,
Yeah.
go to Iraq or something, like go to Iran. Like you think you're oppressed here, like, dude. And it was just wild to me that, that he felt this way. Cause I was like, dude, you're a doctor. Like, you're so gifted. I was trying to like be honest with him, tell him like, you're smart. Like I was taking a, reverse Uno card on him and like complimenting him. Like, dude,
Right.
like you're wealthy, like you're
Right.
successful.
Right.
You have all this knowledge and you're helping people, like you're literally changing people's lives with what you do medically, like, and your wife, like y'all are both, and it was just, but I don't know, man. I worry about people a lot. I do. It bothers me because I think, and I try to be graceful with people, and I think I have more grace with other people than I actually do with myself. But when I've talked to people who believe differently than I do, I always try to take the opposite approach instead of attacking them, because I try to understand them. Like, why do you feel this way? What happened in your life that causes you to have this mindset now? And I always try to like build them up, right? And be a role model and be somebody that actually is trying to be accountable and a leader, not in an attacking way, because that's what they expect. They expect us
Sure.
to attack them.
Right.
But if you come at it in a grace way and you live by example and you speak by example and you do it that way, I tend to find that people listen to you more and be like, wow, that guy, I thought he was on the side and I thought he was going to attack me, but he didn't attack me. I wonder why. Why did he not attack me? Because I attacked him,
Right.
you know,
Well,
but why didn't he attack me back?
these are tremendous leadership points that you're making, Jonathan. Now, my computer battery is about to die, so I think we got to wrap up real quick
You're good.
while we can give you an outro. But this is tremendous leadership. that you're sharing. If you speak publicly, or if folks want to listen to you more, probably got about 90 seconds before the screen's going to pop off. So if you can share where people can find more content, more leadership content that you're creating, that would be awesome.
I haven't done anything per se in terms of creating a bunch of content, but I do post on Instagram, jluke20 on Instagram, and then jlucroy20 on X. And so that's where I predominantly do stuff. I don't do it a lot. I try to pick my spots here and there. I'm not going to talk or tweet or post just to do it. I think that's a waste of time. So, but I like if I see something I like that's interesting and I want to make a comment on it, I will. So yeah, you guys give me a follow and feel free to comment back. I've been in many debates on social media, so I like to talk and learn more about people and what they think and what they feel.
Well, thanks very much, Jonathan. This was awesome.
You got it.